The year is 2009 and Drew Brees is about to face Peyton Manning in Super Bowl 44. The Indianapolis Colts had dominated the AFC all season long and had the best regular season record in the National Football League. Peyton Manning won his fourth MVP that season and threw for over 4,500 yards and 33 touchdowns. He did so with protection from six-time Pro Bowler Jeff Saturday and help from offensive weapons Reggie Wayne, another six-time Pro Bowler, and Pro Bowler Dallas Clark. Not to mention Pro Bowlers Dwight Freeney and Robert Mathis on the other side of the ball. And then you had the New Orleans Saints, the franchise that had never won a Super Bowl, lost their stadium 4 years prior to Hurricane Katrina, the team led by Drew Brees, who came from San Diego after being replaced by Phillip Rivers and benched behind Doug Flutie. Now, I'm not going to act like the Saints didn't have some guys, because they had some guys. They also had the best record in the NFC, but the Saints making it to the Super Bowl surprised a lot of people, especially after they lost the last 3 games of their season. Even Vegas had Indianapolis as a 7-point favorite. Billy Walters, however, thought the game was going to be a lot closer, or otherwise known in the gambling world as a pick'em. And who's Billy Walters, you might ask?
Is there anyone else like Billy Walters? Does anyone else do business the way he does in this town?
No one close. No one close.
Before every game, Billy Walters sits down with his team of analysts and they discuss every aspect of the game. And then he comes up with an opinion of what he thinks the line on a game might be, independent of what Vegas thinks.
What I do, Joe, is I make a line on a game myself. My prediction of what I feel like the differential should be.
Independent of what the experts
Completely
say.
independent. I don't even look at her line when I make my line.
Really?
No.
That's high level shit.
Well, that's all they
And depending on the difference between his opinion and the bookmakers in Vegas' opinion is what decides how much he is willing to risk when he decides to place his bet on a game.
The larger the differential between the number they make and my opinion, the larger bet I make. If I made the line on a game 6 and they had it 8, I would bet 1 unit. If they made it 8.5, I would bet 2 units. If they made it 9, I would bet 3 units. If they made it 9.5, I would bet 4 units. If they made it 10, I would bet 5 units.
And because Billy Walters is a man of principles, he placed the largest bet he had ever placed in his gambling career.
What is the biggest bet you ever placed?
I bet $4.5 million on New Orleans to beat the Indianapolis Colts in the Super Bowl. That's the biggest bet I ever placed.
Did you win?
And the game wasn't even close.
They made Indianapolis 7, and I thought the game should be pick'em.
The Saints not only covered the 7-point spread, but they defeated the Indianapolis Colts by 14 points and won their first ever Super Bowl in franchise history. So how does one get to a point in their life to where you are even able to place 7-figure bets with such confidence? Just like the New Orleans Saints, Billy Walters faced a ton of adversity.
Davis says to give you inside information that you profited from. Do you have any comments? Did you do it, Mr. Walters?
No comment, thank you. No comment, thank you.
From losing loved ones, losing his freedom, and even losing his home, for a guy who had a 30-year win streak against the sportsbooks, he sure took some tough losses along the way. Munfordville, Kentucky, a small town with a population of less than 2,000 people and 80 miles outside of Louisville, is where Billy Walters was born. 18 months after his birth, tragedy struck as his father passed away. Not long after, his mother, who battled addiction with alcohol, left town and left Billy and his siblings to live with his grandmother and other relatives. His grandmother's home in Munfordville lacked basic amenities like running water and indoor plumbing, but this is where Billy's entrepreneurial life began. At the age of 7, Billy took out a $40 loan to kickstart a grass cutting business, and by 9, he had secured another loan of $90 for a paper route, both arranged by his grandmother. This is also the same time period that Billy began gambling. At the age of 4 years old, Billy would get dropped off at the Q&R pool hall that was owned by his Uncle Harry, which basically served as Billy's daycare. And by the age of 6 years old, he was playing penny 9 ball, and by the age of 9, he was gambling on sports with his peers, like the time he placed a $125 bet on the New York Yankees to beat the Brooklyn Dodgers in the World Series. Billy lost this bet, but this ultimately kicked off Billy's love for sports gambling. However, when Billy turned 13 years old, tragedy struck again. Billy had lost his grandmother, which forced him to relocate to Louisville, Kentucky to live with his mother and his stepdad. Upon arriving in Louisville, Billy stuck with what he knew best: working and gambling, mainly because he had to. His mother charged him $10 a month and rent to rent the basement of their home. When Billy was a junior in high school, he brought on even more responsibility when he got his girlfriend and soon-to-be teenage wife pregnant at the age of 16. They were too young to get married in Kentucky, so they drove across the border to Tennessee and lied about their age and came back to Kentucky to live happily ever after. Shortly after they moved in together and began their life as a family, Billy continued to work multiple jobs and stayed in school, fulfilling a promise that he had with his grandmother that he would graduate from high school. During this time, he worked at Churchill Downs as a stable worker, he worked a shift at the donut shop, and a shift at the Shell gas station. Billy would eventually go on to graduate high school and fulfilled his promise to his grandmother. After a string of jobs, after graduation, Billy would find himself at a paint and garnish factory where he became the factory bookie. He was taking bets on the horse races at Churchill Downs and football. He was also loaning money to the workers so they could place bets. He would loan you $10 and you would pay him back $12.50 on payday. He was also hosting card games on the weekend at a local bar and grill, along with excessive drinking and even more gambling. At the age of 19, when Billy was looking for a car to buy, he arrived at the McMacken Motors. The owner of the dealership appreciated Billy's ability to have a conversation, and he saw that Billy worked at the paint factory in town. So he offered Billy a job at the dealership as a car salesman, but the job was 100% commission. Although he was hesitant at first, Billy took the job. This gave Billy a crash course on how to study people's needs to get what you want. The customer needed a vehicle, and Billy wanted to sell it to them. He would study the customer, learning where they lived, where they worked, any information he could obtain so he could sell them the car of their dreams before anyone else could. If his inventory didn't have it, he would find it. He was so competitive that he wanted to be the #1 car salesman at the dealership. With his work ethic and marketing ideas, Billy quickly became the #1 car salesman in the entire state of Kentucky. He was making more money than he had ever seen in his entire life. And with that, Billy was gambling more than he ever had. Oftentimes, drinking and gambling until 6 in the morning every night of the week, which meant spending less time with his wife and child, and by the age of 21, he was known as the biggest gambler in Louisville, Kentucky. This ultimately led to a divorce from his wife Sharon. But Billy didn't stay single for long. In fact, he remarried the same year to an old classmate, Carol Brown, which he quickly got her pregnant as well. Billy's gambling and drinking continued down a dark path.
I was in a bar, I was drinking, and I was caught up in a moment, looking at your wife and saying, look, I lost the home we live in, that's not good.
Carol and Billy got divorced in September of 1976. But Billy would find love once more when he married his third wife, Susan Humphreys, who was a daughter and sister of his two gambling buddies. Because Susan had come from a gambling family, she was used to this pace of life. This was truly a match made in heaven for Billy. He continued to sell cars, eventually working for the dealership across the street, where he made even more money, and also began wholesaling and opened his own dealership. It was also at this time when Billy stepped across the aisle, launching a full-time business as a bookmaker. He took advantage of the laziness of the other bookmakers in town. Billy was known to offer bets sooner in the week than the other bookies. He also offered better odds and higher limits, and most importantly, he didn't care who you were or how much you wanted to bet. He hired other veteran bookies in the area, and everyone in town was booking with the great Billy Walters. It was later reported that they brought in over $6.5 million in wagers. That's until the first Sunday of the 1982 NFL season, when Billy's warehouse bookmaking operation was raided and he and his employees were all sent to jail, held on a $10,000 bond per person. After posting bail, Billy knew if he were to continue his gambling ways that he would now have a target on his back if he stayed in Louisville. Billy was around 36 years old at this time, and he knew at this point in his life he was going to have to make a tough decision: giving up gambling and continue to make money the old school way, or follow his true passion in life and leave town completely. Against their friends and family's advice, Billy and Susan left their home state of Kentucky for Las Vegas.
I came from Louisville, Kentucky, and I couldn't get enough action. All at once, I'm in a place I can get all the action I want.
Right.
His friends told him it was the equivalent of a dope addict moving into a drug den.
The odds of me being successful were probably, I think I put 1,000,000 to 1 in a book. I think they were probably 5,000,000 to 1.
Billy might have moved away from Kentucky to avoid having a target on his back from the authorities, but he would find himself as one of the targets in the infamous Computer Group investigation. The Computer Group was a gambling syndicate created in the early 80s by two men named Michael Kent and Dr. Ivan Midland. Kent worked at Westinghouse, where his role was to use computers to help develop nuclear submarines. Midland was a surgeon with a passion for gambling. They formed the gambling syndicate after being introduced to each other by a mutual friend. Kent had just created a computer program that could help predict the outcome of college football games. He first started using this program to make his competitive softball team better, then started using the program to predict the outcome of college football games after feeding the program data from previous games. The program would spit out a result, and he would use that information to place a bet against the sports books. He He refined his algorithms for over 7 years and eventually quit his job to move to Vegas, where he would become a full-time sports gambler. He would spend much of his time manually entering the data into the program and also placed all the bets by himself. The workload became too much and he needed help. This is when he was introduced to Dr. Ivan Midland. Together, they formed what's considered one of the most successful gambling syndicates of all time. Michael would handle the computer side of things, and Dr. Midland had free reign to place the bets, splitting the profits 50-50. The group expanded quickly and had a network of bettors all across the country. One of those members included other famous gamblers, such as Billy Walters, who worked on a percentage basis. Billy was brought on to place bets with Dr. Midland. He had a wide network of gamblers that could work underneath of him to quickly place more bets before the sportsbooks would get word and manipulate the line. They were often known to bet the other side of the game when the sportsbook would adjust the line, leaving them with a profit either way. Billy hired people to place bets for him, otherwise known as beards. People who could place a bet for the computer group because the sportsbooks did not want to take action from the group.
And I told Michael, I said, they're talking to each other. So we got some girls to start going out and doing the betting because all of the bookmakers knew that girls can't win. And they say, oh, give me Nebraska. That's a good team, isn't it?
After all, Michael Kent estimates the group made $5 million in the year 1983 to 1984. He also claims they never had a losing season betting on college football and college basketball, and occasionally NFL games. Billy Walters claimed there might have been over 1,000 people betting with the computer group's information. One informant claims that the group did $25 million in profit in 1 year. This level of success brought on some serious heat for the group. And on Super Bowl Sunday of 1985, the FBI raided 43 locations across 16 states in an attempt to take down the computer group. The FBI was convinced that the computer group was an illegal bookmaking operation working with the Italian mafia to manipulate betting lines. The group pleaded not guilty to charges of conspiracy, interstate transmission of betting information, and use of interstate facilities in the aid of racketeering. The FBI's 5-year investigation, one in which 45 homes and offices were raided, more than 10,000 telephone conversations were wiretapped, and 89 boxes of evidence were seized. The investigation was eventually shelved and never produced any charges of illegal bookmaking. However, they were charged with illegal sports wagering after the investigation was relaunched, and the group was faced with charges just 2 weeks before the statute of limitations was up 5 years later in 1990. Michael Kent's relationship with Dr. Ivan Midland was damaged beyond repair. Kent found out from the investigation that Midland had secretly placed bets and left Kent out of his fair share, which violated their agreement. Midland was also becoming the face of the group and did not give Michael his fair share of credit. In 1986, 1 year after the Super Bowl Sunday raid, Sports Illustrated did a feature on the computer group, and the article failed to even mention Michael Kent's name, and to make matters even worse, Midland took credit for writing the program and entering the data, which is something he never did. Because of how much the group expanded without Kent's knowledge, he owed the IRS a lot of money for the winnings. Michael and his wife went to court to fight the IRS, but ultimately lost the battle. Michael decided to give Dr. Midland one last chance in 1987, when they agreed upon a new arrangement for the computer group, where Michael would sell Midland the program's picks exclusively for $700,000 for the 1987 college football season. Midland agreed, but after the first week's picks did not hit successfully, he did not pay Michael for week 1. Michael was left with no choice but to lawyer up, and he sued Midland for $589,719, money owed for his share in the computer group's profits and other services. Michael also chose this time to go to the authorities to cooperate on the investigation looming over their heads in exchange for personal immunity. Billy Walters also admitted that he was fooled by Midland. Walters said he quit the group in the spring of 1986 when Midland refused to honor a $110,000 debt. I knew from day one who I was dealing with, but never for a moment did I think the guy could steal money from me, Walters says. I thought I was too important to the operation. I was a guy who moved the money. By this time in Billy's life, he had made enough money for him and Sharon to have multiple homes, open his own businesses, and even become an affluent member of Las Vegas. But once again, Billy Walters was being watched, this time alongside famous golfer Phil Mickelson.
I'm Phil Mickelson, pro golfer.
The SEC looking into how the successful pitchman made an almost $1 million profit off a stock in just 1 day.
Simply put, Mickelson made money that wasn't his to make. When you make money that you're not entitled to, you shouldn't get to keep it. We have not charged him with insider trading.
The SEC says it all stems from a stock tip the 3-time Masters winner received in 2012 from friend and noted gambler Billy Walters. Walters allegedly telling Mickelson to invest in a company called Dean Foods. The problem? Walters' tip was allegedly the result of inside information he received from Thomas Davis, the now former chairman of Dean Foods.
Not even fame could protect one of the most successful sports gamblers in the world.
Walters, Davis says he gave you inside information that you profited from. Do you have any comments? Did you do it, Mr. Walters?
No comment, thank you. No comment, thank you.
He had the information before everyone else. He had tomorrow's headlines today.
With that, they say Walters generated more than $40 million. The 7-year scheme, an elaborate one, involving Walters' longtime friend Thomas Davis, the ex-chair of Dean Foods Company. The allegation, Davis would give secret information. Immediately after, Walters would call in trades. In return, the gambler giving the businessman loans. Prosecutors say the duo tried to hide their tracks.
Walters supplied Davis with an anonymous prepaid cell phone. Walters and Davis also used coded language, including referring to Dean Foods in their illegal conversations as the Dallas Cowboys.
Billy pleaded not guilty, and he claimed he spent little time around Tom Davis, who was on the board of directors at Dean Foods from 2001 to 2015. Davis testified that he did indeed give Billy inside information, but Billy told Joe Rogan in a later interview that Davis was not to be trusted and had many addictions that would make him untrustworthy. Phil Mickelson also claimed his innocence by saying he did not know the information he received was inside information, and he agreed to pay back the $1 million. No charges were brought forth on Phil Mickelson. Billy said he asked Phil Mickelson to testify on the stand for him, but Mickelson never showed up, leaving Billy left out to dry. Billy still put some responsibility on Phil Mickelson for his guilty verdict after not showing up for him in court.
He told me he had been interviewed by the FBI twice and had emphatically told them that I never gave him any inside information. So when I went to court in New York, he promised me he would come and testify. All I want him to do is tell the truth, nothing more, nothing less. So when we tried to call him in New York, his lawyer said he was going to take the Fifth Amendment. I'll never know, and you'll never know if he'd have testified if I'd gone to prison or not. I don't think I would have.
To this day, Billy Walters claims the authorities were only after him because of how many times they tried to bring charges on him in the past and failed. Billy would begin his sentence in 2017. Ultimately, Billy Walters' sentence would end up being commuted in 2021 during President Trump's last week in office, officially making Billy Walters a free man again.
Well, new tonight, President Trump is commuting the sentence of a Las Vegas philanthropist and professional gambler. Well, William Walters is serving 5 years in prison for insider trading. He has already served 4 years of that sentence and has paid also $44 million in fines as well.
These days, Billy still wagers on sports, but spends most of his time helping former prisoners re-enter society, as well as donating his time and money to many charities in Las Vegas. If you guys like this video, please click subscribe or leave a comment down below. Thank you.